So let's talk about either you want your kid to train to become an athlete, or you yourself are a high-performing individual, like a surgeon. Like for me, I need to go to work I need to operate on people and I need to be at the top of my game. So what are additional things that someone who is like really high-performing, or you're trying to, at a young age, get your kids to sort of become high-performing, what do you do?
Set goals and routines. If you have a goal that you're working towards, it can... and you really pinpoint on that goal and you work towards it and you've reversed engineered it, you can put structure around that goal to achieve it. That's what I see a lot of these athletes doing. They know exactly what they want and they get about doing it absolutely every single day. So that's one behavioral aspect to it. The second one is physiological. If you do want to be high performing, you have to get your physiology in order. Physiology first. I believe it's physiology before behavior, meaning you have to be sleeping, you have to be eating well, you have to be performing every single day. So looking at behavioral characteristics of what makes a high performer, it's the habits, it's the rituals, it's the structure, and it's not veering off path from that. As hard as that sounds.
In terms of goal setting, I mean, that's kind of part of neuroplasticity too, right? You're setting a goal and you're setting out to achieve that goal and making a map with which to achieve that goal, essentially.
Correct. And you're opening that dopamine loop. The circuit opens. And if you set that goal and you achieve little milestones towards that goal, that dopamine is going to keep feeding you and you're going to keep going and going. This is why I was a triathlete, which fed into my entire career. I raced, internationally for Australia, and I had a really good coach, and he was the one that set, I didn't have the ability back then. I was young. I was a teenager. I didn't have the ability to set my own goals. So he set them for me and he benchmarked me, and I used to want to be, I wanted to go faster, and he said no. He never spoke to me about dopamine. He probably even didn't know what that was. But if I had gone out and tried to achieve my own goals, I probably would have just failed and not done it. So it's about, how do you goal set? How do you achieve those small milestones? How do you reward yourself with dopamine that keeps telling you to keep going? And you just keep going on that path and try as hard as you can, no matter what age you are. But I'm speaking more so for adolescents, teenagers. Try to limit the amount of social media you have. I see it changing brains, and their brains aren't developed yet.
Yeah.
So that's,
Yeah, so I think with kids, set their goals, help them set their goals.
Yeah,
help
absolutely.
Them set their goals. I think that's, I'm raising 2 kids, so I often think about, how can I get them to find that ambition, but also I think setting like smaller goals is really helpful, because if you say, hey, I want you to get a scholarship, let's say, for example, parents want these things for their kids, right? I want you to get a scholarship. That's like such a lofty goal, and it's like 10 years away, right? Correct. So it's like, how do you get there? Like how do you get, as you mentioned, reverse engineer? Like, what do I need to do right now to get there? And that can be, even again, for your brain health, what can I do right now to prevent Alzheimer's or to prevent dementia later on? I'm reverse engineering the brain I want to have, right?
Yeah. And remember, the best form of exercise is the one that you stick to. So if you do love, this is for kids as well, get them just, what do you love? First and foremost, you can beat anything these days just due to social media. So there's got to be a passion in there, because that passion is going to drive you every day to keep wanting to do it. So once you find that passion, even like with your exercise, with your sleep, gamify it if you have to. And that's what's going to make you stick to it.
Yeah, I think finding the passion is key. You can't force your kid to do something. And I've sort of let my children figure that out for themselves. And when they start showing me signs that they are really into something, we lean into that. But we try not to like put our own desires. Like, Like, I would love it if they were like, professional North Indian dancers. Yeah. But like, that's not going to happen. So that's okay. Yeah. I wanted to talk just briefly before we close out is like, happiness. So in terms of how your brain and happiness are connected from a neurophysiologic perspective.
Yeah, that's such a good question, because I was actually speaking about this yesterday in terms of sleep, right? There's really great studies that show that, people with even mild depression have trouble sleeping. And that's because generally when you think about sleep, we know that serotonin helps us fall asleep and melatonin helps us stay asleep. So there's a strong component there of happiness. But happiness really is, if you think about, when I think about food, food is not food. Food is information, right? So if you feed so I think about happiness not as like, let's walk outside. Like, happiness is what your brain is telling you, and that's being projected in your physiology. So what are you feeding your brain to help it release certain neurochemicals to tell you that we are happy? Happy is just a word to describe a set of neurochemicals that are released. So are we eating a diet-rich food that is, full of tryptophan, precursor to serotonin, which ends up coming from a turkey, for example? Do we have any stresses in our life from a micronutrient perspective that is signaling to the brain, I am a bit under stress right now, so I'm going to lower everything that doesn't need to be there, such as happiness? Does my brain see a perceived threat? I'm evidently not going to be happy about that, so I'm going to lower happiness. So I see it that way. And I also see that, this is from Chris Palmer's book, if you are in an energy crisis in your brain, low energy levels, you cannot think in any way that you are going to just wake up and be happy. Happiness is something that is deliberate. You cannot, and this is I've seen this in studies, but this is also my opinion. You cannot just wake up and be happy. You have to put the work in every day to make yourself happy, because your brain is just there. You are feeding your brain information, and it is feeding it back to you. And so you have to feed it information that is going to give you the happiness that you want. Yeah.
That's really powerful.
Yeah.
It's in our control.
It's in our control.
So we end our podcast with a few questions, and these can be about you individually or about your work. Well, the first question can't be about your work. So the first question is, if tomorrow you lost all your abilities to coach or to do all your training, and you couldn't be an athlete either, because that was something you've done in the past, what would you do?
Oh, I always say that if I wasn't doing what I was doing, I would actually go to space.
Yeah?
Yeah.
That's so cool.
I don't know why. I had this very big fear of planes, and I fly a lot. So to overcome that, I started to learn about aviation. I was a math major, my master's in mathematics. So I do love math and engineering. And then I thought, imagine how amazing it would be to go to space. And so I started investigating. I was like, okay, I would go out of my way and do that, I think.
That's cool.
Yeah.
Maybe someday you will.
We'll see.
What's a life hack or health hack that you haven't shared yet that you would share?
Oh, gosh. One thing that I'm trying to do now is implement a walk for 1 hour a day without any electronics.
That's a good one.
Oh, have you ever tried it?
I not an hour. I've done like 10, 15, 20 minutes, 30 minutes maybe, but not an hour. Yeah,
I leave my house now with nothing, not even I've got my watch at home, and I go.
I guess it's safe in New York to do that.
I know, right?
There's a lot of people around. I mean, it's safe here too, but I think if you live in like a small town, maybe it depends.
Yeah.
What's a non-negotiable, something like that you do every day, no matter whether you're traveling, whether you're, wherever you are in the world?
Exercise. I mentioned to you, today is so bad for me. I've had minimal 4 hours. I still went to the gym because I know that the sheer forcing of blood to my brain is going to actually outweigh the effects of sleep deprivation.
So when you're tired, when you're sleep deprived, what do you focus on? How do you do you do both aerobic and resistance, or do you focus on something in particular?
I go high intensity because I'm trying to get as much blood, oxygen rich, just to my brain as I can, and I focus on breathing.
Okay.
Yeah.
And what's something you know now that you wish you knew earlier?
Oh, that the power of the people that you get your advice from. I used to take advice from anyone, really. Anyone who was going to give it to me, in your 20s, and I was so hungry. I always wanted to be amazing and really great at so I just took advice from anyone, even relationship advice from, my single friends.
We've all done that, unfortunately.
Even to this day, I've got friends who are not married or don't run a business who give me advice. And I think to myself, so now I'm very vigilant in who I ask advice from.
I think that comes with age and maturity, right? I think that's That's good. Louisa, it was so wonderful to have you. Where can my audience find you?
You can follow me on Instagram, Louisa Nicola _ I also now have YouTube, which is just Louisa Nicola. And then you can check out the Neuroathletics website for everything else.
That's amazing.